Adolf Hitler's defeat in World War II was the result of a long chain of catastrophic decisions, each one compounding the next, ultimately dragging Germany into a conflict it was never capable of winning. At the start of the war, Nazi Germany appeared unstoppable. Lightning-fast victories in Poland, Norway, Belgium, and especially France convinced Hitler that his strategic intuition was flawless. This early momentum created a dangerous illusion that Germany could outfight and outthink any opponent. But beneath the surface, serious weaknesses were already forming. One of the most fundamental reasons Hitler lost was Germany's lack of economic depth. The Third Reich entered the war with powerful armies, but its industrial capacity was far too limited to sustain a prolonged global conflict. In contrast, Britain, the Soviet Union, and especially the United States possessed enormous steel production, large populations, and access to global resources. When the US entered the war in 1941, the balance collapsed permanently. American factories produced aircraft, tanks, and ammunition at an unmatched rate. Germany simply could not replace its losses, while the Allies could rebuild entire armies within months. Another major mistake was Hitler's failure to finish his enemies one by one. After defeating France, he expected Britain to surrender. When Britain refused, Hitler wasted precious time bombing cities instead of targeting airfields and radar stations more aggressively. This allowed the Royal Air Force to survive the Battle of Britain. Instead of focusing on a single enemy until victory was certain, Hitler kept opening new fronts, stretching his forces dangerously thin. Nothing illustrated this strategic blindness more than the invasion of the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, launched in 1941, was built on ideological arrogance. Hitler believed the Soviet Union was weak, poorly organized, and would collapse quickly. Instead, Germany found itself fighting a nation with vast distances, extreme weather, enormous manpower, and the ability to relocate its entire industrial base beyond German reach. The further the German army advanced, the longer and more fragile its supply lines became. Winter arrived before Moscow could be captured, and the German army froze in place, unprepared, undersupplied, and outnumbered. By the end of 1941, the war Hitler thought would be won in months had turned into a battle of attrition, something Germany could never survive. The turning point of the entire war came at Stalingrad. In 1942, Hitler became obsessed with capturing the city that bore Stalin's name, believing its fall would break Soviet morale. His generals warned that the region held little strategic value compared to the oil fields of the Caucasus, but Hitler insisted on pushing forward. When the German Sixth Army became surrounded, Hitler refused to allow a breakout, ordering them to hold their ground no matter the cost. The result was catastrophic. Hundreds of thousands of Axis soldiers were killed or captured, and Germany lost not only its best-equipped army, but also its aura of invincibility. As the war progressed, Hitler's leadership became increasingly detached from reality. He interfered in every detail of military planning, often making decisions based on ideology rather than strategy. He dismissed experienced generals and replaced them with loyalists who lacked the courage to challenge him. Orders to hold positions to the last man turned tactical withdrawals into devastating encirclements. Entire divisions were sacrificed simply because Hitler refused to acknowledge changing battlefield conditions. Meanwhile, the Allies were growing stronger and more coordinated. Hitler's decision to declare war on the United States, an unnecessary and irrational act, ensured that Germany would face the world's largest industrial power. This transformed the war into a global confrontation Germany could never win. American shipyards produced Liberty ships faster than German submarines could sink them. Aircraft rolled off assembly lines in numbers that Germany could not even dream of matching. With US bombers striking factories and refineries, Germany's production collapsed. Another fatal factor was the collapse of the Luftwaffe. Attrition from the Battle of Britain, the Eastern Front, and Allied bombing campaigns slowly destroyed Germany's air force. Without air superiority, German troops were exposed, supply lines were disrupted, and cities were reduced to rubble. By 1944, the skies belonged entirely to the Allies. Hitler's fascination with wonder weapons also wasted enormous resources. Projects like the Vita rocket, massive tanks, and experimental aircraft drained materials that could have been used for practical weapons. While impressive technologically, these machines had little impact on the outcome of the war. Germany needed efficiency and numbers, not futuristic ideas that arrived too late. By 1944, Germany was fighting a war of survival on all fronts, isolated, exhausted, and rapidly losing ground. As the Allies advanced from the west and the Soviets pushed from the east, Germany's collapse accelerated. The D-Day landings in June 1944 created a new front that Germany was incapable of resisting. While the Allies liberated France, the Soviet Red Army launched massive offensives, pushing German forces back toward Berlin with overwhelming manpower and firepower. Hitler continued to issue impossible orders, expecting divisions that no longer existed to hold positions that were already lost. The Ardennes offensive, known as the Battle of the Bulge, was Hitler's final attempt to change the course of the war. Initially successful, it quickly collapsed due to lack of fuel, harsh weather, and overwhelming Allied resistance. Germany's last reserves were spent in a single desperate gamble. After this failure, Germany had no strategic options left. Inside Germany, the situation became hopeless. Food shortages, fuel scarcity, and destroyed transportation networks crippled daily life. Allied bombings devastated cities, and millions of civilians fled advancing armies. Hitler withdrew into his bunker in Berlin, isolated from reality, surrounded only by loyalists who fed him optimistic reports he wanted to hear. He refused to surrender or negotiate, prolonging the suffering of his people. By April 1945, Soviet forces encircled Berlin. With defeat inevitable, Hitler took his own life, ending the regime he had built through violence and fear. Germany surrendered shortly afterward. In the end, Hitler lost because he waged a war that defied strategy, logistics, and basic reality. His overconfidence, ideological obsession, refusal to listen to his generals, and catastrophic decisions ensured Germany's defeat. The Allies possessed greater industry, manpower, resources, and cooperation, while Hitler's leadership drove Germany into an unwinnable conflict. Hitler lost not just because the world united against him, but because his worldview made victory impossible. His downfall was inevitable from the moment he chose a path driven by aggression, fantasy, and delusion instead of strategy and reason.